How can a video from a rooftop party sent by a stranger turn a harmless joke into a courtroom war? I'm Lunelle Vey, and 3 months ago, I thought I had everything figured out. My husband Erik was predictably buried in his maritime cargo reports. My 6-year-old daughter Sadie was happily oblivious, and I was living my best life with occasional girls' nights that kept me sane in our perfectly organized suburban existence. I should have known that Erik's military intelligence background meant he never really stopped analyzing patterns. But honestly, who expects their husband to treat a marriage like a case file? It started on a Tuesday evening in October. I was curled up on our cream-colored sectional, scrolling through Instagram while Erik worked late in his home office. The apartment was immaculate as always, Erik's influence, with our wedding photos still prominently displayed, and Sadie's artwork magneted to the stainless steel refrigerator. "Lunelle," Erik called from down the hallway, his voice carrying that measured tone I'd grown accustomed to over 7 years of marriage. "Can you come here for a minute?" I patted down the hardwood floor in my fuzzy slippers, expecting another question about Sadie's school schedule or weekend plans. Erik sat behind his massive oak desk, laptop open, wearing the same focused expression he used for analyzing shipping manifests. "What's up, babe?" I leaned against the doorframe, noting how his dark hair was perfectly styled even at 9 p.m. Erik never looked disheveled. He turned the laptop screen toward me. "Someone sent me this." The video filled the screen, a rooftop party at Elevation, that trendy bar downtown with the city skyline view. I recognized it immediately, though my stomach dropped as I watched myself dancing, laughing, clearly having an amazing time. With Callum Red, my ex-boyfriend from college, his arm around my waist as we swayed to music I could almost hear through the silent clip. "That's from 3 weeks ago," Erik said quietly. "October 7th. You told me you were at Sarah's house for girls' night." My mind raced. The party had been incredible. Sarah had bailed last minute, but I'd run into Callum at Elevation, and we'd caught up like old times. Completely innocent, just dancing and reminiscing about college. But the video looked intimate. His hands on my hips, my head tilted back in laughter, the way we moved together like we still knew each other's rhythm. "Oh my God, Erik, this is so random." I forced a laugh, stepping closer to examine the screen. "I did go to Sarah's, but we stopped by this party for like 10 minutes. Sarah knew someone there." "Sarah was there?" "Yes, obviously. We just popped in to say hi to her friend, then left." The lie came easily, mixed with enough truth to feel natural. "I can't believe someone filmed this. How weird is that?" Erik's grey eyes studied my face with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "Who sent it to you?" I asked, deflecting. "Anonymous Instagram account, created yesterday, no other posts." "Probably some creep from the party. You know how people are with their phones now." I rolled my eyes dramatically. "I'm sorry I didn't mention it, but it was literally nothing. We were there for maybe 15 minutes. Erik nodded slowly, closing the laptop. "Okay, I just wanted to ask." But as I headed back to the living room, I caught him opening our joint credit card statement on his phone. My pulse quickened as I remembered the bar tab from that night. Callum and I had closed down Elevation, drinking expensive cocktails until 2 a.m., while talking about everything we'd missed in each other's lives. The next morning, I woke up to find Erik already gone for work, a note on the kitchen counter about picking up Sadie from school. I immediately texted Sarah. "Did Erik call you about that party at Elevation?" Her response came an hour later. "What party? I was homesick that night, remember?" My hands trembled as I deleted the message thread. Sarah had always been flaky about covering for me, but this felt different, more dangerous. That evening, Erik seemed normal, helping Sadie with homework, discussing weekend plans, asking about my day at the logistics firm where I worked as an operations assistant, but I noticed him glancing at his phone more often, and when I tried to peek at the screen, he'd casually angle it away. Everything okay at work? I asked over dinner. Fine, just a complex shipment from Rotterdam. Erik cut his chicken with surgical precision. How was your day? Boring meetings. Sarah's been weird lately, though. I think she's jealous that I'm having more fun than her. Sadie looked up from her mac and cheese. Mommy, why don't you bring me to girls' night anymore? Because it's for grown-ups, sweetie. You have way more fun with Daddy anyway. Erik's fork paused midway to his mouth, but he said nothing. Later that night, I lay in bed scrolling through my phone while Erik showered. The bathroom door was closed, steam seeping under the frame, and I could hear him moving around with his usual methodical routine. I pulled up my group chat with Sarah and 2 other coworkers, the thread where I'd joked about Erik's cluelessness just days after the party. He doesn't check my location anyway, LOL, I'd written. Could probably tell him I'm at the moon and he'd believe it. Sarah had responded with crying, laughing emojis. Men are so oblivious. Erik's sweet, but he's basically a robot, I'd added. 0 emotional intelligence. Perfect husband for someone who needs space to breathe. Reading it now, the messages felt less funny. I started to delete them, then stopped. If I deleted them now and Erik somehow saw the thread later, it would look suspicious. Better to leave everything normal. When Erik emerged from the bathroom in his navy pajamas, hair damp and face freshly shaved, I pretended to be reading a work email. That video really bothered you, didn't it? I said softly. He sat on his side of the bed, plugging in his phone charger with mechanical precision. Not bothered. Just surprised you didn't mention it. I mention everything to you, babe. This just slipped my mind because it was so brief and unimportant. Right. Erik pulled back the covers and settled in. But instead of reaching for his usual bedtime reading, maritime industry reports, he stared at the ceiling. Are you mad at me? No, Lunelle, I'm not mad. But something in his tone suggested this conversation was far from over. The next few days passed in deceptive normalcy. Erik left for work at his usual 7:30, dropping Sadie at school and texting me updates throughout the day. I responded with heart emojis and updates about my mundane office life, processing shipping invoices and coordinating with trucking companies. But I noticed changes. Erik's home office door, usually open when he worked late, stayed closed. When I knocked to bring him coffee, he'd minimize windows on his computer before thanking me. His phone, previously left casually on counters and nightstands, now stayed in his pocket or face down on surfaces. You're being paranoid, I told myself while reorganizing our bedroom closet on Saturday morning. Erik was at Sadie's soccer game, something I'd begged off, claiming a headache. He's probably just dealing with work stress. But paranoia felt justified when I found Erik's laptop open on the kitchen counter that afternoon, credit card statement displayed on the screen. Our joint account activity from the past month, with one line highlighted in yellow. Elevation rooftop, 340 Zergadalen, October 7th, 11:47 p.m. $340 for a 10-minute stop where I'd supposedly barely had one drink. I slammed the laptop shut and paced the kitchen, my mind spinning with damage control strategies. The charge was damning, but not impossible to explain. Sarah and I could have bought rounds for other people. The timestamp was late, but maybe it was when they processed the payment, not when we actually left. When Erik returned with Sadie, grass-stained and chattering about her team's victory, I was ready. Babe, I saw the credit card statement open on your laptop, I said casually while unpacking groceries. I'm so sorry about that bar charge from the party. Sarah and I ended up buying drinks for her friend's birthday group. I should have mentioned it. Erik nodded, helping Sadie out of her cleats. No problem. Just seemed like a lot for a quick stop. I know, right? Drinks are insane at those trendy places. That's why I usually avoid them. Makes sense. Erik's tone was neutral, but he was watching my face again with that analytical intensity. That night, after Sadie was asleep, I decided to address the elephant in the room directly. Erik was in his office again, Door cracked open, typing steadily on his laptop. "Hey," I said, settling into the leather chair across from his desk. "I feel like there's weird energy between us since that video thing. Can we talk about it?" Erik saved his work and closed the laptop, giving me his full attention. "Sure. What's on your mind?" "I think you're suspicious of me, and I get it. The video looked more intimate than it was, and I should have told you about running into Callum. But I didn't because I knew it would bother you for no reason." "Why would it bother me?" "Because he's my ex and you're not super comfortable with me having male friends." Erik's eyebrows raised slightly. "When have I ever said that?" "You don't say it directly, but I can tell. Like when my coworker Marcus invited me to that industry happy hour, you got weird about it." "I asked what time you'd be home. That's not getting weird." I sighed dramatically. "See, this is exactly what I mean. You're so literal about everything. I can read between the lines, Erik. You don't like me socializing without you." "That's not true." "Then why are you acting strange about a 5-second video of me dancing with someone I dated in college?" "It was completely innocent." Erik leaned back in his chair, studying me with those penetrating grey eyes. "You're right. I'm sorry if I've been distant. The video just caught me off guard." "I understand. But babe, you have to trust me. I would never do anything to hurt our family." "I know." Erik reached across the desk and squeezed my hand. "We're good." But as I headed to bed that night, I heard Erik's office door lock for the first time in our marriage. Sunday morning brought a text from Sarah. "Can we talk? It's important." We met at a coffee shop near my apartment, Sarah looking uncharacteristically serious in yoga pants and an oversized sweater, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy bun. "Erik called me," she said without preamble. My stomach dropped. "About what?" "The party at Elevation. He wanted to know if I was there with you." "What did you tell him?" Sarah stirred her latte nervously. "The truth, Lunelle, that I was homesick that night and you went out without me." "Sarah," I hissed, glancing around the crowded coffee shop, "why would you do that?" "Because I'm not going to lie to your husband about your affair." "It's not an affair. Callum and I are just friends." "Friends who disappear together at 1 a.m. Friends you lie to your husband about." Sarah shook her head. "I've covered for you before, but this is getting out of hand." "Covered for me? When?" "The hotel charges on your credit card that you claimed were for work conferences. The rideshare receipts to Callum's neighborhood. The group chat messages where you literally call Erik clueless." My face burned with embarrassment and anger. "You've been spying on me." "I've been watching you destroy your marriage while pretending to be the victim, and now you want me to be complicit." "I'm not destroying anything. Erik and I have problems that existed long before Callum came back into my life. I'm just exploring my options." "Your options?" Sarah stood up abruptly. "Lunelle, you have a 6-year-old daughter and a husband who worships you. What options are you exploring exactly?" "You wouldn't understand. You've never been married." "Thank God, if this is what marriage looks like." Sarah left me sitting alone with my untouched cappuccino and a growing sense that my carefully constructed world was beginning to crack. That evening, Erik seemed normal again, making dinner, helping with Sadie's bath, settling in to watch a movie together on the couch. But when I excused myself to use the bathroom, I caught a glimpse of his phone screen, a folder labeled Documentation with dozens of files inside. My blood ran cold as I recognized screenshots of text messages, bank statements, and what looked like a detailed timeline with dates and locations. Erik wasn't just suspicious anymore. He was building a case. The following week, I threw myself into damage control mode. If Erik was documenting my behavior, I needed to create a paper trail of normalcy. I scheduled legitimate girls' nights with coworkers, made sure to come home early, and flooded social media with happy family photos. "Look at this beautiful life," I captioned a picture of Erik and Sadie building a puzzle. "Grateful for my amazing husband and daughter. I am blessed, our family first." The comments poured in from friends and colleagues. You guys are goals. Erik is such a catch. Perfect family. But Erik's behavior grew more concerning. He started asking specific questions about my schedule, requesting details about coworkers' names and restaurant locations. When I mentioned grabbing drinks after work, he'd casually ask which bar and who else was there. You're being weird again, I told him on Thursday evening, as he helped Sadie with math homework at our kitchen table. How so? All the questions about my social life. It's like you're interrogating me. Erik looked up from Sadie's worksheet, his expression neutral. I'm just interested in your day. Daddy asks about my day too, Sadie chimed in. He wants to know about my friends and what we do at recess. That's different, sweetie. You're 6. Why is it different? Erik asked. I stared at him, unsure how to respond without sounding guilty. Because adults don't need to account for every minute of their time. I don't need you to account for every minute. I'm just making conversation. But it didn't feel like conversation. It felt like surveillance. That weekend, Erik's mother, Carla, and his sister, Naomi, came for Sunday dinner, a monthly tradition I'd grown to dread. Carla was a sharp-eyed 61-year-old retired teacher who'd never fully approved of me, and Naomi was a 29-year-old attorney with Erik's same analytical mind and zero patience for small talk. Lunelle, you look tired, Carla observed as I served the pot roast I'd spent all afternoon preparing. Are you sleeping well? Just busy with work, I replied, avoiding eye contact. What kind of work keeps you out until midnight on weeknights? Naomi asked innocently. I froze with the serving spoon halfway to her plate. Excuse me. Erik mentioned you've been having a lot of evening meetings lately. I glanced at Erik, who was cutting Sadie's meat with focused attention. Not meetings, girls' nights. I'm allowed to have a social life. Of course you are, Carla said smoothly. It's just unusual for someone with a young child to be out so frequently. What's unusual is my husband discussing my schedule with his family, like I'm a teenager with a curfew. The table fell silent except for the clink of Sadie's fork against her plate. Erik finally looked up, his expression unreadable. I mentioned that you've been busy lately. That's not discussing your schedule. It feels like a discussion to me. Maybe because you're being defensive, Naomi said bluntly. Maybe because I'm being judged for having friends and interests outside this house. Nobody's judging you, Carla said in the tone she'd probably used with difficult students. We're just concerned about the family dynamic. The family dynamic is fine. Erik and I are fine. Sadie is happy and healthy. I don't understand what you're all so worried about. But even as I said it, I could see Sadie watching the adults with wide, confused eyes. The tension was palpable, and my defensive tone was only making it worse. After dinner, while Erik loaded the dishwasher and Sadie played in her room, I overheard Naomi talking to her mother in the living room. Something's not right, Naomi said quietly. She's acting guilty about something. I've thought so for months, Carla replied. The way she deflects questions, the constant phone checking, those late nights, it's textbook cheating behavior. Should we say something to Erik? He's not stupid, honey. If something's going on, he already knows. I crept back to the kitchen, my heart pounding with indignation and fear. Erik's family was conspiring against me, turning him against me with their suspicions and judgment. They'd never liked me, never thought I was good enough for their precious Erik with his military service and successful career. That night, after everyone left, I confronted Erik while he folded laundry in our bedroom. Your family hates me, I said, sitting cross-legged on our bed. That's not true. Your sister basically accused me of cheating at dinner. Erik paused in folding one of Sadie's school shirts. Did she? You heard her. All those questions about my schedule, the comments about late nights. She thinks I'm having an affair. Are you? The question hung in the air like a physical presence. Erik's tone was casual, almost conversational, but his eyes were fixed on mine with laser intensity. How can you even ask me that? You didn't answer. Of course I'm not having an affair, Erik. I can't believe you'd even think that. Then why are you so defensive about your schedule? Because I feel like I'm being watched and judged and questioned constantly. It's exhausting. Erik resumed folding laundry, each movement precise and controlled. I'm sorry you feel that way. That's it. That's your response. What would you like me to say? That you trust me, that you'll tell your family to back off, that you believe me when I say nothing is going on. Erik set down the shirt and looked at me directly. I trust you, Lunelle, and I believe you. But something in his tone suggested he was lying. The next morning, I arrived at work to find my coworker Jennifer waiting by my desk with coffee and a concerned expression. We need to talk, she said quietly. We walked to the break room, where Jennifer closed the door and turned to face me. Erik called the office yesterday, she said. My blood ran cold. What? He said he was trying to reach you about a family emergency, but your phone was going to voicemail. He wanted to know if you were here. Was I? You'd left for that client lunch, remember? But Lunelle, when I told him you were out of the office, he asked specific questions about your schedule. What time you left, who you were meeting with, when you'd be back. Maybe he was worried about the emergency. There was no emergency. When you called him back an hour later, he acted like nothing had happened. I sank into a plastic chair, my mind racing. What did you tell him? The truth, that you'd gone to lunch with the Peterson group at that restaurant downtown. But Lunelle, he was taking notes. I could hear him typing while I talked. Taking notes about what? Everything. Times, locations, names. It felt like an interrogation, not a worried husband trying to reach his wife. I stared at the break room's fluorescent lights, feeling the walls closing in around me. Erik wasn't just suspicious anymore. He was actively investigating me, calling my workplace, questioning my colleagues, documenting my movements like I was a suspect in a criminal case. And the most terrifying part was that I was guilty of exactly what he suspected. By the end of October, my paranoia had reached a fever pitch. Every time Erik's phone buzzed, I wondered if someone was sending him more evidence. Every casual question felt like a trap. Every late arrival home prompted new lies that I struggled to keep straight. The breaking point came on Halloween night. We'd taken Sadie trick-or-treating around our neighborhood, Erik carrying her candy bag while she ran from house to house in her princess costume. It should have been a perfect family evening, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Erik was watching me, analyzing my behavior, storing away observations for his mysterious documentation folder. After Sadie went to bed, exhausted from sugar and excitement, Erik poured himself a glass of wine and settled on the couch. Come sit with me, he said, patting the cushion beside him. I curled up next to him, trying to project normalcy despite my racing heart. I saw something interesting today, Erik said casually, swirling the wine in his glass. Oh yeah? What's that? A funny video from that party you went to, the rooftop one. My entire body went rigid. What do you mean? Someone posted a longer version on their Instagram story. You and that guy, Callum, right? You two looked like you were having a great time. Erik, I already explained. I know. You stopped by for 10 minutes. Erik's tone was conversational, almost amused. But in this video, you're really going for it. Dancing, laughing, very intimate. Intimate? We were just dancing. Were you? The question felt loaded with implications I didn't want to explore. Yes, we were just dancing, for a few minutes. Then Sarah and I left. Right, with Sarah. Yes, with Sarah. Erik nodded thoughtfully, taking another sip of wine. That's interesting, because in this video, Sarah's nowhere to be seen. And you and Callum leave together. Alone. At what looks like 1 a.m. My mouth went dry. That's not... I mean, Sarah might have already gone to the car, or... Lunelle. Erik's voice was gentle but firm. I talked to Sarah. She wasn't there. She was homesick, remember? The lie crumbled around me like a house of cards. I could feel Erik's eyes on my face, cataloguing every expression, every tell, every desperate attempt to salvage a story that had already fallen apart. "Okay, fine," I said, my voice rising with defensive anger. Sarah bailed on me last minute, but I'd already gotten dressed up and I didn't want to waste the night. So I went out by myself, ran into Callum, and we caught up. "Is that a crime?" "Not a crime, no, but you lied about it." "I didn't lie. I just simplified the story because I knew you'd make it into a bigger deal than it was." "Like I'm doing now?" "Yes, exactly like you're doing now." Erik set down his wine glass and turned to face me fully. "So, you went to a party alone, spent the evening with your ex-boyfriend, left with him at 1 a.m. and charged $340 to our joint credit card. And you didn't think I'd want to know about that?" "We didn't leave together. We left at the same time. There's a difference." "Where did you go?" "Home. I came home." "At 1 a.m.? "I don't know what time I got home. I wasn't watching the clock." "You got home at 2:45 a.m. I was awake." My heart hammered against my ribs. Erik had been tracking my movements that night, noting times, building his case piece by piece. "So what if I did?" "I'm an adult, Erik. I can stay out late occasionally." "With your ex-boyfriend?" "With a friend, who happens to be my ex." "A friend you lied about seeing." "I didn't lie." But even as I said it, I knew how hollow it sounded. I had lied, repeatedly and elaborately, and Erik knew it. "Lunelle," Erik said quietly, "I need you to be honest with me. Are you having an affair?" The question hung between us like a loaded gun. I could feel the weight of the moment, the significance of my answer. Everything depended on what I said next. "No," I said firmly. "I am not having an affair." It was technically true. Callum and I hadn't slept together yet. We'd kissed a few times, spent hours talking about our connection, made plans to see each other again. But we hadn't crossed that final line. Erik studied my face for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay, I believe you." But something in his tone suggested he was lying. The next morning, I woke up to find Erik already gone and a note on the kitchen counter. "Had to leave early for a client call. Can you pick up Sadie today? Thanks. E." The formal tone sent chills down my spine. Erik never signed notes to me with just his initial. At work, I could barely concentrate on shipping invoices and logistics coordination. Every time my phone buzzed, I expected bad news. Every time a coworker looked at me strangely, I wondered what they knew. Around noon, Jennifer approached my desk with a worried expression. "Lunelle, there's someone here to see you." I looked up to see a middle-aged man in a cheap suit standing near the reception area, holding a manila envelope. "Lunelle Vey?" he asked as I approached. "Yes?" "You've been served." He handed me the envelope and walked away, leaving me standing in the middle of my office lobby with 20 coworkers staring at me in shock. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope and pulled out a thick stack of legal documents. The header read, "Petition for annulment, fraud." Below that, in Erik's precise handwriting, was a note. "Exhibit list attached. Video evidence, financial records, timeline of false statements, witness depositions. You have 30 days to respond." I flipped through the pages with growing horror. Screenshots of text messages I'd forgotten sending, bank statements highlighting suspicious charges, a detailed timeline of my girls' nights, cross-referenced with rideshare receipts and hotel bookings, and photos, dozens of photos of me and Callum at various locations around the city, time-stamped and geotagged, showing a pattern of deception that stretched back months. At the bottom of the stack was a single sheet of paper with one line: Alternative. Public trial with all evidence presented in open court. I sank into the nearest chair as the reality hit me. Erik hadn't just been suspicious, he'd been building a comprehensive case against me, documenting every lie, every inconsistency, every piece of evidence that proved I'd been systematically deceiving him. And now, in front of my entire office, I'd been served with papers that would destroy not just my marriage, but my reputation, my career, and my relationship with my daughter. The man I'd underestimated as an emotionally distant workaholic had just demonstrated exactly why military intelligence analysts are trained to be patient, thorough, and devastatingly effective. The aftermath of being served at work was swift and brutal. Within hours, news of the legal papers had spread through the office like wildfire. Colleagues who'd once joined me for lunch and happy hours now avoided eye contact in the hallways. The whispers followed me everywhere. "Did you see those papers? I heard it was fraud." Her poor husband. Jennifer was the only one brave enough to approach me directly, cornering me in the parking garage as I tried to escape early. "Lunelle, what the hell is going on?" she demanded. "It's complicated," I said, fumbling with my car keys. "Complicated? You got served with annulment papers at work. That's not complicated, that's nuclear. Erik is being vindictive because I went out a few times without telling him. He's trying to punish me for having a social life." Jennifer stared at me incredulously. "A social life? Those papers mentioned fraud, financial deception, and witness depositions. That's not about having a social life." Before I could respond, my phone rang. Unknown number. "Mrs. Vey, this is Patricia Chen from Morrison & Associates. We represent your husband in the annulment proceedings. We need to schedule your deposition." "My what?" "Your sworn testimony regarding the allegations in the petition. We also need to inform you that 3 of your colleagues have been subpoenaed to testify: Jennifer Martinez, Sarah Lane, and Marcus Webb." The phone slipped from my hand, clattering on the concrete floor. Jennifer picked it up, ending the call. "They're subpoenaing my coworkers," I whispered. "Lunelle, what did you do?" That evening, I sat in my empty apartment. Erik had taken Sadie to his mother's house, until things are resolved, staring at the legal documents spread across my coffee table. The evidence was overwhelming and damning. Bank statements showing regular charges at hotels near Callum's apartment. Rideshare receipts documenting 17 trips to his neighborhood over 6 months. Screenshots of group chat messages where I'd bragged about my backup plan and mocked Erik's trust. But the most devastating evidence was a sworn statement from the bartender at Elevation, who remembered me and Callum as regular customers, who seemed very much like a couple, and had been seen kissing and leaving together on multiple occasions. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "We need to talk, now." She arrived 20 minutes later, her face flushed with anger and anxiety. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" she demanded, not bothering to sit down. "Sarah, I can explain." "Explain what? That you've been lying to everyone for months? That you dragged me into your affair by using me as an alibi? That now I have to give a deposition under oath because of your deception?" "It's not an affair. Callum and I are just—" "Stop." Sarah held up her hand. "Just stop lying. I've seen the evidence, Lunelle. Erik's attorney showed me the photos, the receipts, the messages. You've been systematically cheating on your husband and using your friends to cover for you. You don't understand. Erik and I have been having problems for years. He's emotionally unavailable, controlling. So you decided to have an affair instead of getting counseling or filing for divorce like an adult. I didn't plan for this to happen. I ran into Callum at a bar. We started talking and you've been meeting him at hotels for 6 months while telling your husband you were with me." I sank onto the couch, the weight of my choices finally hitting me. "What did you tell them?" "The truth. That you asked me to cover for you multiple times, that you bragged about Erik being clueless, that you called him controlling and said you needed options in case your marriage didn't work out. Sarah, you're supposed to be my friend. Friends don't ask friends to commit perjury. Friends don't use friends as alibis for affairs. And friends don't put friends in legal jeopardy because they can't keep their lies straight." After Sarah left, I called my mother, Rosa, desperate for support and sympathy. "Mija, what's all this about legal papers?" she asked in her thick accent. Erik is trying to divorce me because I went out with friends a few times. He's being completely unreasonable. Divorce? But what about Sadie? What about the house? He's claiming fraud, Mom. He hired lawyers and everything. I think he's having some kind of breakdown. Fraud? What kind of fraud? I explained the situation in the most favorable terms possible, portraying myself as a victim of Erik's controlling behavior and paranoid suspicions. You need to fight this, Lunelle. Don't let him take your daughter and your home because he's jealous. But even as my mother offered support, I could hear the doubt in her voice. She knew me well enough to read between the lines. The next morning brought another devastating blow. I arrived at work to find a police officer waiting in the lobby. Lunelle Vey, I need to speak with you about a report you filed. My heart sank as I remembered the complaint I'd filed 3 days earlier, claiming Erik had hacked my phone and violated my privacy by accessing my location data and messages. The detective reviewed your case, the officer continued. The evidence shows your husband accessed only joint accounts and shared devices, which is legal. Your report has been classified as false and will be forwarded to his attorney as evidence of malicious conduct. I watched in horror as the officer handed me a copy of the report, now stamped "Unfounded, False Report" in red letters. Every move I made to defend myself was backfiring spectacularly. Erik had anticipated my responses and prepared countermeasures for each one. He'd turned my own words against me, exposed my lies with documented evidence, and now even my attempts to portray him as the aggressor had become proof of my dishonesty. That afternoon, I received a call from Sadie's daycare. Mrs. Vey, we need to discuss some concerns about pickup times. Our records show that on 17 occasions over the past 6 months, Sadie was picked up more than 2 hours late. All of these incidents correspond to dates you'd marked as girls' nights on your emergency contact calendar. There must be some mistake. We have detailed logs, Ma'am. On several occasions, Sadie was the last child here, and she expressed confusion about where you were. We're required to report patterns like this to family services. I hung up the phone and stared at the wall, finally understanding the full scope of Erik's case against me. He hadn't just documented my affair, he'd proven that my deception had affected our daughter's welfare, turning me from a sympathetic wife seeking freedom into a negligent mother, prioritizing her affair over her child's needs. The man I'd dismissed as an emotionally distant workaholic had systematically dismantled my life with the precision of a military operation. And the most terrifying part was that he'd done it all legally, ethically, and with evidence so overwhelming that no jury would ever side with me. I was completely, utterly, and deservedly trapped. The courthouse conference room was sterile and intimidating, with fluorescent lighting that made everyone look pale and tired. I sat across from Erik and his attorney, Patricia Chen, a sharp-featured woman in her 40s who'd laid out my destruction with the efficiency of a surgeon. Erik looked different, harder somehow, wearing a navy suit I'd never seen before, and an expression of cold professionalism that made him seem like a stranger. He hadn't looked directly at me since I'd entered the room. Mrs. Vey, Patricia began, opening a thick folder. We're here to discuss settlement terms for the annulment petition. I trust you've reviewed the evidence we provided. I glanced at my court-appointed attorney, a tired-looking public defender named Robert Kim, who'd been assigned to my case after 3 private lawyers had declined to represent me. My client disputes the characterization of fraud, Robert said weakly. Patricia smiled without warmth. Let's review the evidence, shall we? She spread photographs across the conference table like playing cards. Me and Callum at various restaurants, bars and hotels around the city. Time-stamped, geotagged, and cross-referenced with my alibis to Erik. October 7th, Mrs. Vey claimed to be at Sarah Lane's house. Evidence shows her at elevation rooftop with Callum Red until 2 a.m., followed by a hotel charge at the Meridian downtown. September 23rd, claimed girls' night at Jennifer Martinez's apartment. Evidence shows rideshare to Mr. Red's neighborhood, return trip at midnight. August 15th, claimed work conference requiring overnight stay. Evidence shows personal hotel booking near Mr. Red's residence, no work event scheduled. The list went on for 20 minutes. 6 months of systematic deception, documented with bank records, GPS data, witness statements, and photographic evidence. Furthermore, Patricia continued, we have sworn statements from 3 coworkers detailing Mrs. Vey's admissions of her affair, her mockery of her husband's trust, and her explicit statements about maintaining a backup plan with Mr. Red. She placed another document on the table. Mrs. Vey's group chat messages, recovered from Ms. Lane's phone. Erik's sweet, but he's basically a robot. 0 emotional intelligence. Perfect husband for someone who needs space to breathe. I winced as my own words were read back to me in Patricia's clinical tone. He doesn't check my location anyway, LOL. Could probably tell him I'm at the moon and he'd believe it. And finally, having Callum back in my life makes me realize how much I've been settling. Erik's stable, but there's no passion, no excitement. C makes me feel alive again. The words hung in the air like toxic smoke. Even I could hear how callous and calculating they sounded when stripped of context and emotion. Mrs. Vey, Patricia said, closing the folder, you systematically deceived your husband about your whereabouts, your activities, and your relationship status for 6 months. You used joint marital funds to finance an extramarital affair. You involved your minor daughter in your deception by using childcare as cover for your activities. And when confronted, you filed a false police report against your husband. This constitutes fraud sufficient to void your marriage contract. Mr. Vey is entitled to an annulment, full custody of your daughter, retention of all marital assets, and reimbursement of legal fees. Robert cleared his throat nervously. Those terms seem excessive. The alternative, Patricia interrupted, is a public trial where all evidence will be presented in open court. Video footage of Mrs. Vey and Mr. Red in intimate situations. Financial records showing the scope of her deception. Testimony from co-workers, daycare staff, and family members about the impact on the child. She leaned forward slightly. Mr. Vey has been more than generous in offering a private settlement. In a public trial, Mrs. Vey would face potential criminal charges for filing a false police report, and the custody arrangement would likely be even less favorable. I looked at Erik desperately, searching for some trace of the man I'd married, the father of my child, the person who'd once loved me enough to build a life together. Erik, please. Can we talk about this privately? He spoke for the first time since entering the room. There's nothing to discuss privately, Lunelle. But we have a daughter together, a history, 7 years of marriage. 7 years of marriage that you systematically betrayed for the last 6 months. I made mistakes, but we can work through this. Couples therapy, counseling. You didn't make mistakes, Erik said quietly. You made choices, calculated, deliberate choices to deceive me, endanger our daughter's welfare, and commit adultery while using marital funds. It wasn't adultery. Callum and I never... You transferred $6,000 from our joint savings account to his Venmo account, labeled as a loan. What was that for, Lunelle? I felt the blood drain from my face. I'd forgotten about the money. Callum had needed help with his rent, and I'd convinced myself it was temporary, that I'd pay it back before Erik noticed. He needed help. With money you stole from our daughter's college fund. The word stole hit me like a physical blow. I was going to pay it back. With what money? Your salary barely covers your personal expenses. Patricia placed another document on the table. Forensic accounting shows that Mrs. Vey has spent approximately $12,000 of marital funds on her affair over 6 months. Hotels, restaurants, gifts, and direct transfers to Mr. Red. Robert looked at me with barely concealed disgust. Even my own attorney was appalled by the evidence. Mrs. Vey, Patricia said, you have 2 options. sign the settlement agreement, which allows you supervised visitation with your daughter and protects you from criminal prosecution, or proceed to trial, where you'll face public humiliation, potential jail time, and complete loss of parental rights. I stared at the papers through tears I didn't remember starting to cry. Everything I'd built, everything I'd taken for granted, was gone. My marriage, my home, my daughter, my reputation, all destroyed by my own choices. How long do I have to decide? 24 hours. Erik stood up, buttoning his suit jacket with mechanical precision. For what it's worth, Lunelle, I hope you choose the settlement. Sadie doesn't need to see her mother on trial. As he reached the door, I called out desperately, "Erik, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." He paused without turning around. "I know you are, but sorry doesn't undo 6 months of lies." The next morning, I signed the papers with shaking hands, while a notary witnessed my signature. The marriage I'd destroyed with my own choices was officially over, and the life I'd taken for granted was reduced to supervised visits with my daughter and a small apartment across town. As I walked out of the courthouse, I saw Erik waiting by his car with Sadie, who ran to hug me with innocent enthusiasm. "Mummy, Daddy says I get to have 2 houses now." I held her close, breathing in her familiar scent of strawberry shampoo and childhood innocence, knowing it might be the last time I could hold her without supervision. Erik approached carefully, his expression softer than it had been in the conference room. "The supervised visits start next week," he said quietly. "Saturdays 2 to 6 p.m. at the family center downtown. Erik, take care of yourself, Lunelle. For Sadie's sake." He gently extracted our daughter from my arms and buckled her into his car, leaving me standing alone on the courthouse steps with a manila envelope containing the signed settlement and the ruins of my former life. As I watched them drive away, I finally understood the true cost of my choices. I'd traded a stable marriage and loving family for excitement and passion, and I'd lost everything that actually mattered. The man I'd underestimated had proven that actions have consequences, lies have prices, and betrayal has a cost that can never be fully repaid.